Texas, the state that has carried out the execution of more than 580 people since 1982, an unimaginable number if you have never stepped inside the death chamber in Huntsville. There, every final breath is recorded, every last glance is witnessed by only a few. Among the hundreds who have been put to death, only a handful left echoes that still linger for decades, not because of what they did in detail, but because of the feeling they left behind. For the victims, the courts, and those who stood witness in their final moments. Some acted out when they were denied something. Some betrayed trust to cause tragedy. And some, even when fully restrained, turned their final moments into a haunting memory for the entire system. You will not hear every detail here, but you will sense that something is deeply wrong. These are 10 ruthless inmates who were executed in Texas. What made them stand out was the way they met their end. No explanations, no remorse. Just one last meal and a few strange final words. Before we begin, please hit like, share this video, and leave a comment. Where are you watching from? Which country or state? Let's see how far these stories have traveled. First, Donald Newbury. Texas carries a scar in the history of its prison system. One December day in the year 2000, when 7 inmates vanished from Connolly Unit without making a sound. Not through a violent riot, but through cold, calculated planning that felt unreal. Donald Keith Newbury was one of them. As a teenager, Newbury drifted in and out of correctional facilities like switching classrooms. Abused at a young age, with no stable family, he grew up believing one simple thing: the world has no place for the weak. In 1998, when he was sentenced to 99 years for charges involving an armed offense, he just laughed. To Newbury, so-called rehabilitation was for people who still had something to lose. With 6 others, he took control of an entire prison block, seized weapons, cut off communications, and walked out like characters from a script no one dared to write. The Texas 7, as the media called them, quickly became a symbol of chaos. Following a plan they had mapped out, the group moved across Texas, San Antonio, Pearland, Dallas, step by step, like they were walking on their own private map. On Christmas Eve that year, inside a sporting goods store in Irving, tragedy struck. Aubrey Hawkins, 29 years old, a devoted officer, had just finished dinner with his wife and young son when he got a call about a break-in. He arrived at the scene alone 4 minutes later and never made it back home. No one offers condolences for a man on death row, but the silence inside the execution chamber that night spoke for itself. After more than a month on the run, Newbury was captured in Colorado. He did not deny anything. He did not beg for mercy either. "I am not a good man," he once told a reporter, "but I am not the monster they painted me to be." In 2002, he was sentenced to death. On February 4, 2015, Donald Newbury was taken into the execution chamber at Huntsville Unit. No family, no chaplain, no special meal, just a standard prison tray. When asked for his final words, he did not speak of guilt. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply said, "Every insult only hurts the flesh. Pamper your soul with vague virtue. I love you all, that is all." 14 minutes later, the name Donald Newbury became just another line in history. But the loss he left behind lives on. Aubrey Hawkins, 29 years old, a devoted officer, a husband, a father. He never made it back to his Christmas dinner. His young son grew up without memories of his father's face. This was never just a death sentence. It was a deep wound in the heart of Texas law enforcement. A reminder that brutality does not always scream. Sometimes it moves very quietly, and with a plan. Second, Leon Dorsey. Texas has never lacked people who break the law out of desperation. But Leon David Dorsey IV was not poor. He was not hungry. He chose darkness as his late-night thrill, then calmly left behind fear caught under the harsh lights of a security camera. On the night of April 4, 1994, a Blockbuster store in Dallas stayed open late. 2 young employees, Brad Lindsay, 20 years old, and James Armstrong, 26 years old, were counting movie tapes and closing out the cash register. As they locked the final door, Leon walked in like any passing customer. Behind that door, there was only silence. The tape kept his face, the one carrying a gun, but no one knew his name. Not the police, not anyone on that quiet street who heard nothing but the soft click of a door closing for the last time. The next morning, 2 lives were gone, $400 missing, and every question turned into empty space. Police brought Dorsey in for questioning. He leaned back, stared straight ahead, and brushed it off. Had nothing to do with it. They believed him. The gun was still there, but no one dug deeper. Blockbuster faded away, and Leon Dorsey slipped back into his other nights. In September that same year, in Ellis County, a small convenience store stayed open while the city slept. A 51-year-old immigrant woman named Hyansuk Chan was working the night shift. Dorsey showed up again. This time, no sweet words, no safe opened. Behind the walk-in freezer, there was nothing left but shattered breath. Police found the gun. This time, they did not miss it. Dorsey was arrested. He admitted halfway, "That woman? Yeah, that was me. Blockbuster? No." 3 years passed. The old security tape was dug up by the FBI. The man's posture, the way he lowered his head, his height, everything matched. When agents asked him one last time, Dorsey just laughed. "Yeah, I did it. I did what I needed to do. I don't care." He did not apologize. He did not blame a rough childhood, or hunger, or drugs. He just shrugged. "They're gone. It's done. Why keep feeling guilty?" In 2000, Dorsey faced trial for Blockbuster. Inside the courtroom, James Armstrong's mother looked straight into the eyes of the man who took her son away. "James was a good man. You are not. You took a life just because you liked watching fear in their eyes." The death sentence was given. Dorsey was sent to Huntsville, ranked as a level 3 inmate, always causing trouble, showing off scars, laughing at prison rules. Fellow inmates gave him a nickname no one wanted to repeat: Pistol Pete. On August 12, 2008, Leon David Dorsey IV was led into the death chamber. Behind the glass, the parents of Armstrong and Lindsay stood still. No one cried. No hands trembled. Dorsey turned, locking eyes with the people whose lives he had scarred forever. His voice did not shake. "I love all y'all. I forgive all y'all, and I'll see y'all when you get there. Do what you're gonna do." The needle slipped in quietly. Pistol Pete left the prison. But Blockbuster, that late night, the bright lights, 2 young men, still lingers in a corner of Texas where the security tape never stops rolling. Third, Matthew Lee Johnson. Texas, 5 o'clock in the morning, inside a convenience store in Garland. A 76-year-old woman was starting her early shift, brewing coffee, setting gum and candy on the shelf. For more than 40 years, she had never feared a night or early shift. She never forgot to bring candy for her 3 granddaughters, the kids who always called Friday afternoons Nini Days. Matthew Lee Johnson stepped in, but not to buy candy. The store's security camera shows him moving behind the counter, holding a container of liquid and a lighter. With one small motion, the liquid poured over her silver hair. The old woman's hands trembled as she opened the safe. Cash, a wedding ring, 2 packs of cigarettes, a handful of change, traded for a single lit match. Johnson turned and walked out. In his hand, a few crumpled bills, a candy bar slipped and hit the street. Behind the counter, the heat flared up again. She ran for the sink, trying to save herself. But fire does not always care how hard we fight. A witness grabbed a fire extinguisher, putting out what was left clinging to her clothes. By then, the ring was already deep in Johnson's pocket, smoke still circling the doorframe. When police found him, hiding behind an old brick wall, he was still clutching those few bills, too fresh to spend. 5 days later, Nancy Judith Harris passed away. 3 granddaughters no longer had a Friday to call Nini. Johnson's record started at 15. Stolen cars, biting an officer, theft after theft. Out of jail, he married, had 3 kids, but no one, not even him, believed he would stay out of trouble long. In court, the video played back. The image of liquid pouring over silver hair flickered across the screen. The entire room held its breath. His lawyer spoke of a broken childhood, needles, drugs. Johnson bowed his head, repeating over and over, "I just wanted to scare her. I didn't mean to. But the safe was open, the fire tin burned." And Nancy Harris never came home. On May 20th, 2025, exactly 13 years later, Matthew Lee Johnson walked the hallway to Huntsville Unit. No appeals, no delays, no special meal, just a standard tray like every Texas inmate since 2011. Behind the glass stood the Harris family, 3 granddaughters, now grown, a son who still carries the scar from those ICU nights. They say he was not afraid to die, but what he feared, only he knew. He turned, met their eyes. As I look at each one of you, I can see her on that day. I please ask for your forgiveness. I never meant to hurt her. On the other side of the glass, no one nodded. The cold needle touched his vein. Matthew Lee Johnson was gone, taking one last apology with him, but he left behind a question no one has ever truly answered. Is regret enough to put out the ashes of a night once set on fire? 4th, Richard Lee Tabler. Texas has always had peaceful Thanksgiving nights. But Thanksgiving in 2004 in Killeen was not one of them. A man who once stood behind a bar counter, fired after clashing with the manager, came back to settle an old score, turning 2 nights at the end of November into a nightmare that people still whisper about. Richard Lee Tabler. He was born into a troubled family, a mother who tried to end the pregnancy, a father who was never home, childhood stories soaked in alcohol. He grew up moving between rundown houses, failed at school, struggled with ADHD, repeated 3rd grade, and spent his teens punching cell walls just to feel something. On November 26, 2004, Thanksgiving night, Tabler called Muhammad Amina Rahmouni, the manager at the club where he used to work. A fake meeting. Buy a sound system, pay $1,500, quick deal, no hassle. Rahmouni did not come alone. Frank Zaid, his friend, drove him. They never made it back. All that was left was an empty parking lot, a flash from a handgun, and a video camera held by his partner Payne. Police never found that tape, only heard the story. Tabler dragged both men out of the car, fired again to make sure no one survived. That same night, Tabler called the police himself. "I will do it again. Shut that club down, or I will wipe them all out." 2 days later, he kept his word. Amanda Benefield, 16 years old, Tiffany Dotson, 18. 2 young dancers at that same club. He lured them with empty promises, led them out to a quiet lake, left secrets buried under the water, then called the police again, calm as ever, "I'm not done yet." Tabler did not run far. That night, police arrested him on an unrelated theft. In the interrogation room, he confessed, then took it back, then confessed again. In 2007, he was sentenced to death for Rahmouni and Zayed. Benefield and Dotson's names stayed on file, never reaching a final verdict. Inside prison, Tabler did not stay quiet. He threatened a state senator, smuggled phones, ran a blog cursing the police, sent threats through a prison chaplain. He filed to drop his appeals 3 times, then changed his mind. One day, he demanded to die at once. The next, he sued for more time. In February 2025, 21 years after that Thanksgiving night, Tabler dropped his final appeal. No special meal, just a standard tray at Huntsville unit like every Texas inmate since 2011. His 77-year-old mother, his sister, and the woman he married through letters all waited outside the prison gates. In those final weeks, people said Tabler had changed. Praying, raising lizards, writing books, teaching inmates how to paint landscapes. But the 4 names, Rahmouni, Zayed, Benefield, Dotson, never came back. Before the needle touched his vein, Tabler looked back. No threats, no curses, no talk about the list of 11 more he once claimed he would kill. He simply said, "I deeply regret what I have done. Thank you to the officers for your patience. Thank you to my family and my lawyer." The lights inside the execution chamber dimmed. Tabler left Huntsville. But those 2 Thanksgiving nights, Texas will never erase them from memory. 5th, Garcia Glen White. Houston in the late 1980s was a city where sirens cut through the night, but no one expected 3 people would stay behind on the cold floor of an old apartment. All because of a man who once dreamed of wearing a football jersey. Garcia Glen White was born in Houston, once wore the Wheatley High number, once ran down a football field like if he ran fast enough, he could outrun everything behind him. One knee injury turned that dream to nothing. White dropped out, picked up odd jobs, then swapped night shifts for cheap smoke in apartments that smelled like someone else's broken life. In 1989, White stepped inside the home of Benita Edwards, a 38-year-old widow with twin daughters Burnett and Annette, both just 16. That apartment had become a place where people hid, where fear clung to the walls stronger than the smoke. On November 30th, White knocked to ask for a few hits and demand something Benita refused to give. One word, "no," was answered with a blade flashing through stale air. Burnett and Annette ran out, but had nowhere to run. When he left, the place smelled of blood. A blanket held the marks of a struggle. The door stayed shut until a boyfriend named Solomon opened it 2 days later. Solomon carried that night for the rest of his life, haunted by being 2 days too late. The twins' grandmother never made it in time to take them in as she promised. The funeral for 3 women filled a poor neighborhood on Houston's east side, leaving behind a home no one dared enter again. For 6 years, those 3 names hung in police files. Only the ones left behind knew that pain never closed. 6 years later, White stepped into a convenience store with Tecumseh Manuel, leaving another life behind a cash register for a handful of bills. Manuel confessed to everything, pulling White back to the Edwards case. White denied it, then blamed someone named Moore, but Moore had died 4 months before. DNA left no doubt. He admitted it all. In 1996, the court handed down the verdict for Burnett and Annette, 2 girls who never made it out of that smoky apartment. White fought his sentence for more than 20 years. In 2015, he escaped the needle by just 1 night. But cold ashes never stay cold forever. In October 2024, Garcia Glen White quietly walked the hallway to Huntsville unit. No appeals, no special meal, just the standard tray like every Texas inmate. On his final night, he did not write a will, did not leave a long message. When asked for his last words, White looked through the glass and said softly, "I am sorry for all the pain I caused you. I trust in God. Keep loving one another." He closed his eyes, lips moving in a quiet hymn. The last note brushed the ceiling as the needle found its mark. In the waiting room, no one answered back. In the files, those 3 names stayed silent, just like Houston kept that case locked away for 6 long years. And sometimes, a fragile hymn is all a man has to wrap up what he can never make right. 6th, Betty Lou Beets, Texas, still holds old brick yards, patchy lawns, and an old wishing well sitting quiet under the porch light. But no one ever thought that one day, from the bottom of that well, they would pull up a body. Her 5th husband, Jimmy Don Beets, a man who believed he would die from heart disease, not from a bullet that stopped his heart right on his own porch. Betty Lou Beets was born in North Carolina. Her father drank himself through her childhood. One bout of measles stole her hearing when she was just a baby. At 12, her mother vanished into a psychiatric hospital, leaving Betty behind as an unwilling big sister, forced to look after her younger brother and sister. At 15, Betty dropped out of school and married her first husband. 6 husbands came and went. 1 took a bullet. 1 faced a blade. 1 nearly lost his life under the wheels of her car on a dark road. The strangest part, the ones who survived all came back to court, pointing at her and saying, "She tried to kill me." In the summer of 1983, Jimmy Don Beets disappeared from their small wooden house near Cedar Creek Lake. His wife Betty called the police crying that her aging husband, with his bad heart, must have fallen overboard from his fishing boat. A drifting boat, a few leftover heart pills. Rescue teams tore the lake apart for 3 weeks. Flashlights cut through the Texas nights. No body ever surfaced. Everyone believed he drowned. But Betty's son carried the truth. His mother forced him to cover up his stepfather's body right under the wishing well statue, then scatter the pills and push the boat out to drift. 6 years later, a tip led police back to Henderson County. A search warrant was signed on a rainy night. Neighbors gathered, watching the patrol car lights paint the street red. Investigators dug up the yard. Jimmy Don lay still. His heart stopped not by disease, but by a trigger pulled in the dark. Another pit under the garage floor. The remains of Doyle Wayne Barker, her 4th husband. 2 bodies, and a wife still sitting inside the house, quietly making tea as if nothing was buried under her yard. Court files opened. Old stories spilled out. Beets' son stood at the stand and described every shovelful of dirt. Betty cried, claiming she was only a victim herself, just a woman who took enough beatings and threats from men. Her lawyers turned page after page about abuse, but no one could look at that dry well and believe she was innocent. Each layer of dirt uncovered another rotting secret, another silent question for the children who still carried the Beets name. Children who once helped bury their own stepfather in their front yard. 15 years of appeals, stacked signatures, and last-minute stays. On February 24, 2000, Betty Lou Beets walked the hallway to Huntsville Unit. No special meal, no final plea for mercy. 6 children, 9 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren stood outside, watching the dim lights fade through thick glass. The needle found its mark, quieter than any courtroom argument. In the end, Betty Lou Beets left no gravestone, just ashes scattered on the grave of the mother who vanished first, taking with her the dream of any wish ever coming true at the bottom of that well. 7th, Cameron Todd Willingham, Corsicana, Texas. The night of December 23, 1991. Inside a small wooden house at 1213 West 11th Street, 3 children lay asleep. Christmas lights blinked by the window. Wrapped gifts waited to be opened. When neighbors saw Cameron Todd Willingham burst out the front door, flames had already swallowed half the roof. He screamed, "My babies are in there!" as he ducked low, hair singed, eyes burning red. Some said Willingham cried out like a father in agony. Others said he turned back, pulling his car away from the fire, afraid the gas tank would catch. 3 little ones, Amber Louise, 2 years old, and twin girls Carmen Diane and Cameron Marie, just turned 1, never made it out. Christmas turned silent in that Corsicana street. When the smoke cleared, police sifted through the charred floors. They said the fire was not just ashes and ruin. They pointed at puddle-shaped burn marks, 3 separate ignition points. They called it arson. No one else could have said it but someone inside. Willingham did not run. He stood there. But the prison gate opened for him anyway. The evidence? A jailhouse informant, Johnny Webb, said Willingham confessed behind bars, then took it back, then changed it again, then filed to withdraw it once more, asking, "Is it too late to admit I lied?" In court, the prosecutors pointed at his skull tattoos, his Iron Maiden poster, painted him as a monster dressed up as a father, living in music and dark thoughts. His wife, Stacy, first swore, Todd never touched the kids. Then she changed her words, then changed them back. At times, she said he confessed in the visiting room. Other times, she whispered, "I don't know for sure." Decades passed. Stacy's words blurred and shifted, but that pile of Christmas ashes stayed a black mark in Corsicana. Experts argued for years. The fire started on its own, or by a human hand. Gerald Hurst, a veteran fire investigator, called the whole case junk science. Old theories that burned an innocent man alive. Willingham shouted his innocence, refused a deal for life in prison. He said, "I would rather die than admit to something I didn't do." On February 17, 2004, Cameron Todd Willingham walked the hallway into Huntsville Unit. White lights, steel needle. In front of him, his ex-wife, holding both memories and accusations. Willingham did not pray. He did not plead. He hurled broken curses, raised a middle finger at the witness room. The warden gave the quiet signal to end the final word with a silent push of the needle. His ashes were carried home by his parents, scattered quietly over the grave where 3 little girls stayed behind that Christmas night. Only ashes remained. No apology left behind. Only one question no one dares to close. Did the fire take 3 children, or did the court take the life of a man who should have gone home instead? 8th, Edgar Tamayo. Houston, the night of January 31, 1994. Officer Guy P. Gaddis was just 24 years old. The badge on his chest still carried the fresh silver of a rookie not yet used to the streets at night. On that patrol shift, he arrested a Mexican immigrant, Edgar Tamayo Arias, for carrying an illegal gun. A drunk man, empty pockets, eyes locked on Houston's red traffic lights. Gaddis handcuffed Tamayo, pushed him into the back seat of his patrol car, thinking he had just wrapped up a routine call before heading home, where his wife waited. and a child not yet born, still waiting for his father's first words. But behind his back, hidden under his waistband, was the small gun the quick roadside check missed. The car rolled on, tires sliding under neon signs still burning through the Houston night. One small shift of Tamayo's body. Then 3 sharp gunshots cracked through the seat behind Gaddis. Bullets tore through the driver's seat, ending the promise of a young officer's life before it even began. The car swerved and slammed into a utility pole. Tamayo kicked the door open and vanished into the dark. But Houston did not let him run far. A manhunt closed in within hours, bringing Tamayo back to where he started. The back seat of a patrol car, now colder than the steel on his wrists. The Gaddis family received the worst news alongside a promise left hanging. Guy would have been home that night to talk about the name of his soon-to-be-born son. That boy grew up never once hearing his father's voice. The case closed quickly. There was no doubt who fired the gun, but 20 years later, the fight shifted to a birth certificate. Tamayo was a Mexican citizen. Houston police had never told him he could meet with his consulate, a violation of the Vienna Convention. Mexico sued the United States at the International Court of Justice, demanding Texas stop the execution. Texas refused. The White House stayed silent. The Gaddis family spoke for themselves. The man who shot Guy will not return to Mexico in flesh and blood. On January 22, 2014, Edgar Tamayo Arias walked the hallway to Huntsville Unit, under the white lights known to every Texas inmate. No special last meal, no last-minute appeal slipped under a cell door. Behind the thick glass, Gaddis' son, now 20 years old, sat quietly, staring at the man who ended his chance to ever hear the word Dad. Tamayo spoke softly. "I am sorry for what I did. I hope you all forgive me. I am at peace." The needle found its mark. His ashes stayed in Texas. There was no return flight home. The pole that stopped Gaddis' patrol car still stands in Houston, an unmarked white stone among streetlights. Since that night, every rookie stepping into a Houston patrol car knows the story of 3 shots that stole a father's voice before it could ever be heard. 9th, Elroy Chester. Port Arthur, Texas. A sleepy port city on the Gulf of Mexico. Rows of cheap tin roof houses, porch lights flickering too weak to catch the shadow of one man. In the second half of 1997, people in Port Arthur began shooting out motion sensors, changing locks twice, buying guard dogs, all to keep out one man wearing a homemade mask, Elroy Chester. He did not carry swords or clubs. He quietly unscrewed porch lights, cut phone lines, pulled a hockey mask or a cloth hood over his head, slipped through backyard fences like a predator after dark. One August night, Chester pried open Kenneth Risinger's house and stole a .380 handgun, the weapon he carried to 5 lives lost. That same night, he locked a 10-year-old child in a closet, bolted the door, and walked out like nothing had happened. He changed the lock, locked the door behind him, hid the mask under his bed. Port Arthur stayed quiet, but shivered. Police records later counted at least 25 break-ins, 5 assaults, 10 shootings, 5 people who never got back up. Most died inside their own homes. An old man asleep next to his wife. A waitress just off her shift at Lou Beets' cafeteria, forced to the ground before she could unlock her door. Chester once told investigators, "I did it because I hate white folks. They owe me." But his victims came in every color. White, black, Latino. The night did not choose skin, and neither did Chester. On February 6, 1998, Chester crossed the threshold of the Ryman house, a place he had broken into once before but found empty. This time, he found Erin, 17, her sister Claire, 14, and a baby just 1 year old. Under the barrel of his gun, Chester made the sisters strip, tied their hands, taped their eyes shut. He tore down the last line Port Arthur had left. When Willie Ryman III, a firefighter, Erin's uncle, stepped into the backyard to check on the house, Chester pulled the trigger. One bullet tore through the firefighter's uniform. Willie dropped where he stood, never making it back to the fire truck he once called home. Chester fled the yard, leaving Erin, Claire, and the baby's cry echoing through the dark. He was arrested within 48 hours. Hiding in his father's house, gun tucked away, mask still under the bed, but breath heavy like a cornered animal. In the interrogation room, Chester sneered, "I shot that firefighter. I did it and he deserved it." In court, he screamed threats at prosecutors, at police, even at the families of the jury. His IQ tested at 69. His lawyers begged he's not competent to face execution. But the jury saw the mask, the gun, the porch lights he unscrewed, the wires he cut. The judge said, "Chester was a poor student, but he was very good at killing." On June 12, 2013, Elroy Chester lay strapped to the Huntsville unit gurney, just 2 days shy of his 44th birthday. He looked at the Ryman family, his voice steady and clear. "I just want to say, I do not want you to hate me for taking your loved one's life. I know it does not mean much. I told the truth because I thought you should know who did it. God sees everything. Do not hate me. If you do, you will face him later. Live your lives, but do not hate me. I am sorry for taking your loved one's life." He turned to his lawyer. "Thank you for fighting for me in court. Thank you for standing by me all these years. Elroy Chester is not a bad man. I know who I am. People say I did not do these things, but I did." He exhaled one last time. "That is all I have to say. Warden, go ahead." 10th, David Leonard Wood. In the dry summer of El Paso, 1987, hot winds blew dust far out into the empty desert. And in that same dust, young girls vanished one by one, as if they had never been there at all. David Leonard Wood, a drifter with tattoos and a cold, careless stare, sat behind the wheel of an old pickup truck, smiling as he lured young names and young hopes into the darkness with him. Marjorie Knox was only 14, left Chaparral for a Valentine's party, and never came back. Desiree Wheatley disappeared after a quick stop at a corner store. Clues were thin. An old pickup, an orange blanket, strands of blonde hair caught in a vacuum bag. As each mound of desert earth was turned over, the truth rose with it. 6 bodies lay scattered just a few hundred yards apart, closing the faint hope of mothers who still kept their daughters' photos on bedside tables. Wood was arrested, hands cuffed under the weary yellow lights of an El Paso police station. He looked straight into the camera and swore he was innocent, that if he ever did bury anyone, he would hide them where no one would ever find them. But the statements, the fibers, the words of a survivor, all tied him to the killing ground that local papers called the Youth Graveyard. For 30 years, Desiree Wheatley's family has never dared to put away her framed photo. Dawn Smith's mother has grown old with the desert dust, her hair now white and tangled, still clinging to the yellow shirt Dawn wore on her last day. She has held on to it for decades, waiting for an apology Wood never gave. He once called himself smart, a man who knew the law inside out, smooth-talking, never caught off guard. Inside his cell on death row, Wood turned away every question. He just sat still, empty eyes staring out at the cold prison yard. El Paso's final sunset has not come for him yet. His trial was rescheduled, delayed, postponed again and again by old files and new appeals. But desert sands do not wait. The name Desert Killer still lingers, quiet as the shallow graves he once dug. 30 years later, the families, the parents, the siblings, the friends still carry the same wounds. In their dreams, many still hear their daughters calling home, but the only one who truly knows the secrets buried in El Paso's sands still sits behind bars, sealing his lips in endless silence. These cold graves do not just hold 10 criminals. They bury stolen childhoods, torn dreams, and parents and children who never got to come home. The families live with a wound that never fully heals, carrying an emptiness no sentence can erase. These stories must be told, not to spread fear, but to remind us that justice must never fall asleep. If you want the truth to keep moving forward, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment, because darkness only wins when we stay silent. This is the story, and as long as justice stands, it will never be finished.